Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of We Need to Talk. I'm your host, Malynda, and I have two very special guests with me today, sitting in for Karmel, my dear sweet other half, my husband, John Volk.
Who dat?
And, of course, no stranger to the We Need to Talk family, my all-encompassing, as I call him, Drexel Heard.
Hello.
I've always tried to figure out what Drexel is in my life, and we just decided that he's everything.
Omnipotent.
Oh, God. Oh, no. Here we go with the omnipotence. Oh, he always says that. Well, thank you guys for sitting in with me. We're going to have a good conversation today. Last week, we started our discussion on the division in America and everything that's going on in the country. So I just want to continue that part two. If you guys have been paying attention and seen... In the last few weeks, there's been a lot of racial undertones and rhetoric from the president, which we've seen, obviously, in the last few years, but it's been at an all-time high recently. Drexel just put on his sunglasses, and I really don't know what to do right now.
I don't want to see racial tweets from the president.
Nobody wants to see them, but they're happening. And I'm curious what your thoughts are on where we're going to go from here, because there is still this huge divide. We've always been divided, I feel like, but it's we're kind of going backwards a little bit, at least from what I've been seeing. And I obviously think that the president is fueling this, and a lot of people are agreeing with him, unfortunately. And I'm not really sure what this means in the next year or the upcoming election, but I don't know how we get past this point.
Sure. So I think that obviously the president's no stranger to trying to ramp up his base. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. We also know that the president's base is the minority. And I always tell people, just because you're louder than everybody else doesn't make you the majority. And I think that what we're seeing is the president has a huge platform, so he can be loud, but that doesn't reflect a majority of the country. Not saying that there aren't racists out there. Right. I'm just saying that there are a majority of people who do not think like the president. Mm-hmm. That said, we know that in 2016, there were a lot of people that didn't vote. I think that what we're going to see, hopefully, is a shift in people saying, yeah, well, I set out the last one because of X, Y, and Z, thinking that it would shake things up in a different direction, in a more positive direction in terms of how to shake up the system. But what it's doing is not shaking up it did not shake up the system. It just shook up America. Right. And that's not what I think a lot of those folks were trying to get at. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that structurally people, an election's not going to change a system. One election's not going to change the system. That's not a thing. And so I think that what people are going to realize over the next few months is that they're going to actually have to get out and vote, and that's going to be the...
Do you think at this point, and John, I'll direct this question towards you, at this point, if you haven't changed your support from the president, that you identify as a racist, even though you never claim it, but do you think that they fall into that category?
The obvious answer is yes, right? There's a point in which you should stand up. I think the more interesting thing, though, is, and this Drexel got me thinking about this just talking, being the loudest voice in the room, and where that kind of just normalizes in today's day and age. A lot of people don't speak up. A lot of people don't vote. A lot of people, like the odds of you having someone who's much more vocal than you on your Facebook feed, or I guess the odds are much more in favor of you not being the most extroverted person, but that person that you're going to be friends with, that's going to actually connect a bunch of other people because just generally who they are, they're just extroverted and they're just out there, that populates your news feed, and then you just see and that's even though that's not who you are as a person, I think by just sheer seeing it so often, it kind of drags you up into it. So I think and what I mean by that is I don't think people are that unchanging where they're just well, this is all right, but next time I'll speak up to what I actually feel. I think people are just kind of malleable. So I not to say that oh wow, these people are now racist and everything, but I don't know if who they were, pre 2016 is the same person that they are now.
I mean, I also think that I was reading something this morning about how factory workers in Ohio voted for Donald Trump. I mean, this is a story that we've seen over and over in the last few months, which is, they voted for Donald Trump not because of the rhetoric that he was saying, but because he promised them that they would keep jobs in certain vulnerable areas, and that he would not only keep them there, but bring more jobs there. What we've seen is the opposite of that happening. We've actually seen it with the tariffs that the president has put on other countries, with plants closing and manufacturing jobs being lost all across the country. They're starting to recognize that, and they realize that the president is unable to keep his promises.
If you're Trump, what do you say to them to get reelected?
Great question.
Well, you keep saying what you're saying,
right?
But I would say that he's going to say, this is what the president's going to say. He's going to say the economy's doing great. It's on the up and up, which is what he's been saying. He's going to say, it takes a little bit of time for these things to kick in, but what we've seen is unemployment rate down. What we've seen is black unemployment rate down. What we've seen is, wages going up. He's going to say that without the underlying he's able to say that without the underlying context of being like, well, you haven't actually passed any policies that have been able to make those changes, and 5 years from now or 3 years from now, we're actually going to see that the tax cuts that the Republicans passed a couple of years ago are going to have the opposite effect on the economy.
Right.
So he's able to say them right now because he's under a Barack Obama cloud of economic policy. But say he gets reelected. And now the policies that the Republicans have put forth are going to put us back in a recession. And I don't say that because of the policies, because of what they just voted on 2 years ago. I say that as this is what history has shown us. Every time Republican presidents in office with Republican Congress, their policies have put us into a recession. It takes the Democrat coming in after them to clean it up, and then it goes back. It's a back and forth thing, So Republicans out there pretending like they own the economy, is a lie. It's like Republicans saying they have national security interests at heart.
Right.
That is a lie.
Of course.
It's also a lie that they're pro-life and that they have an interest in pro-life policies. That is a lie. So I know people are like, well, there are some things that Democrats can say. But the difference is that Democrats have always been there to help people, not strip rights away from people. It's always been advancing more rights for marginalized groups as opposed to taking something away from somebody else.
Which I've always found very interesting because the Republican Party identifies itself with Christianity. And that, to me, being a Christian is what the basis of being a Christian is helping marginalized groups.
Well,
but they've never been about that.
Wouldn't you latch yourself to the biggest group possible with some of the loudest voices? That is no, seriously, with that is also, Southern white Baptists are not immune to being racist
and hateful.
And they make up one of the Southern Baptist Conference makes up, I think that's their name, makes up one of the largest evangelical groups in the country.
SBC.
So of course I would want to latch myself to those people because, listen, if I need somebody to get out and vote, they're going to do that.
Right.
And I think the only thing that's separating evangelical Christians from being Democrats is one issue, and that is this idea of pro-choice and pro-life, and that's it. It's, and gay marriage and stuff like that.
LGBT rights for sure.
But I also but at the same time, like that argument also, is a stale argument at this point when it comes to biblical quote unquote factuality, right? Like you can't. When you sit down with Christians and you lay it all out, you're like, well, that's not really what this says, but okay, So I think that that's the only way that this president wins re-election is if and what I we were going to talk about Elijah Cummings here in a little bit in Baltimore, but I don't think that black folks are going to let this slide
at all
going into the next election.
Right.
They would listen. They'll vote for whoever. a donut before this president gets reelected if it's up to black folks. So
well, because he is just targeting them at this point, and now it's just not even funny. And did you see the hashtag he used, Blacks for Trump 2020? And I was like, you and that hashtag need to go because this isn't a thing, really. I mean, you have people, you have the race baiters,
Diamond and Silk,
you have Diamond and Silk, you have Terrence Williams, you have those black people that are for some reason still supporting Trump and not really. But the man has a way with words. I mean, as limited as he is with his vocabulary, he really does have a way with words because he does know how to pander to people to make them believe that he actually is for them in some way.
But I don't know that it's necessary. I think when it comes to like folks like Diamond and Silk and Terrence, like all those black people that support Trump, I don't know that if you set them down in a room, that they actually, like if you ask them,
you think they actually believe
that they actually believe that, because something tells me that they enjoy the attention.
Of course.
Yeah.
Because like, look, where did Diamond and Silk come from? I mean, my God, like what do they do?
They support Trump.
It's
that's
like
literally all they do.
I mean, that's all they do. So they have no
clout.
They have no clout in any party. They're not member. I mean, I'm sure they're registered Republicans, but it's not like they've been active. It's not like they're active members of the party. They came out of nowhere, and yet it's like a two-way street. That they know that they're being used by the president, and that they are using the president for their own financial gain. Yeah. Which, at the end of the day, is what the president's been doing all along to millions of people.
Right. Right.
But the president also has a $97 million war chest right now going to re-election. He'll be at $1 billion come next year. So, I mean, that's just one person. That's what we spent on the election last year, total between two candidates. So one person going in with $1 billion is going to be very interesting.
So when we get into, breaking down a lot of his tweets and the things that he says in the conferences and breaking down his hateful rhetoric, speaking about the squad, now speaking about Elijah Cummings and talking about the infestation, quote unquote, within Baltimore, what does it take for Republicans to actually call him out on this stuff? Because I feel like they're very, very quiet.
A spy. No, seriously. I mean, if you saw the morning shows this morning, Rick Scott in Florida, it was like, well, I didn't write the tweets. Well, no shit, Sherlock. Your name's not next to it, right? Like, he's like, well, I didn't do it. And then the argument is, and Mick Mulvaney, who's the acting chief of staff, the president's acting chief of staff, said, well, what do you expect the president to do when somebody's attacking him? Just sit back? Well, yes.
That's what Obama did.
That's what every president has done.
Right.
And I know some people like that. They like this, and I get it. Look, you are your best spokesperson, and Trump understands that, right? And which is fine in some cases. But if you're the president of the United States, maybe tone it down a little bit and talk about the policies that that you're touting that could help Baltimore. Yeah. I think that would have been a smarter political move. Absolutely. Be like, listen, these are the things that we've been doing. These are the things that we think that can help Baltimore. I've talked to several African-American prominent people in Baltimore or in Detroit or in Chicago, or, he attacked San Francisco. He's attacked Atlanta. He's attacked, several different cities across the country. He certainly doesn't like it when, people he doesn't like attack certain cities, and then tells them to move out of the country. So if he has a problem with American cities, he certainly should be moving himself. But so I think that's what you're seeing is the Republicans are going to say, well, what do you expect him to do? Well, that's not the question. What do you think?
Right. Right.
Would you tweet that? That'd be my first question. Would that be your tweet?
Something, yeah.
Do you believe that? It should always be.
Well, I feel like also with Republicans, they're also afraid that they're going to be next on the chopping block with him. Like if they speak up against him, like
I think you see the only people who have come out, Republicans that have come out by and large and spoken against him were ones that weren't running for re-election. So there's something to that. I think it's more interesting to even consider the choice to do what he's doing and to target these people in this way. Obviously, like he thinks that there's going to be more benefit than than there is cost to that.
Yeah, for sure.
And like maybe there is something to that with the fact of, like, again, people of color who are going to support him regardless. Then it doesn't really matter what he says. Right. You know what I mean? So like I don't know. I'm not savvy enough, and I just don't care enough, actually, to know how many voting blocks he needs to secure for reelection. I don't know if you need this particular how much of the African American vote you actually need for this, or if it's better for him in just straight up a reelection game to be like, let me just take pot shots at this, because the people who are really vocal are like the people who are the Southern Baptists, so and all I have to do is just fire off a couple of these type of tweets, and like those are the people that will show up on the voting on the polling days. That's more interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think this president knows that he will. So the reason why he's doubling down, and this is not just my opinion, is that he knows that if he loses an iota of his base, then he's going to lose.
Done. Yeah.
Right.
So he's going to double down on those folks and then try to peel off different Democrats, which is why he's trying to. He has inserted himself into every situation when Democrats are going at each other, because he wants to separate Democrats. I don't know that is going to help him any. I think Nancy Pelosi, for everything that she's been doing, obviously we know that Nancy Pelosi is like master chess player, legislator. But I also think that, people are like, well, Nancy's not calling for impeachment. Well, the moment that Nancy Pelosi says that she is for impeachment, they tie everything to Nancy Pelosi.
Correct.
And so Nancy Pelosi is just trying to be that person in the background, because what then happens is that through re-election, the Republicans will tie every candidate to Nancy Pelosi. She's the boogie person, yet she's the only person that can maneuver herself around this president and smartly around Mitch McConnell. So I think she's playing it as I know I'm the liability in terms of re-election, but I'm also the one to help move a lot of this legislation forward. And I think, even today you started to see certain Democrats slowly start to come out for impeachment a little bit more. And so I think that's going to be the Republicans' whole game plan, is to try to separate separate the different voting blocks, which is why the president's very vocal about, going after places like Baltimore. Because if he can say that, look at what the black legislatures are doing in Baltimore with black voters, he thinks that he can peel off black voters from somebody like Elijah Cummings. Like, that is crazy to me.
He does think he's omnipotent.
I mean, listen. I mean, it's wild to me. I mean, and if you look at it, like, it's smart, because you throw everything at the wall. It's like throwing pasta at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And so he's going to try everything in the toolbox, because what happens is that come next July, when the debates start ramping up, I mean, it's game over for him, because he's not a good debater.
Right.
He'll try to dance around everything. So he's got to do everything he can between now and then to make up for the fact that he's about to get crushed, no matter who the Democrat is, publicly in debates.
But does that even matter?
I think that it does. I think that showing his incompetence in front of the American people in a public setting is it. Not from him. I'm saying somebody somebody next to him laying out the facts next to him.
But didn't we see that last time?
That was a different candidate. I think
they were just already against her.
I think the majority of people were already against Hillary Clinton anyway, so that wasn't going to matter. I think that somebody who is,
more likable, for some reason.
will be able to lay out that case a little bit better against the president.
So in regards to impeachment, because it seems I'm surprised that we haven't even got to the point, and I know we were talking about this the other day, we were like, everybody just has to be patient, Nancy Pelosi knows what she's doing, but it almost seems as if they're waiting to see if he gets reelected before they even make any form of moves, because if he isn't reelected, then they can try and convict him based on what Mueller said in his testimony, that you can try and convict a president that isn't a sitting president anymore. So it seems like that is almost kind of what their path is.
Well, the Democrats have a small window, and it's going to be the fall. So they have only the fall to make that decision on whether, if they get into December in the winter time, they're not going to do impeachment next year. That'll just be a shit show. So it'll be the fall. It'll be October, November September, October, November, when the decision's going to be made, which is why I think that they're starting to ramp it up. You saw that the House Judiciary Committee and Jerry Nadler certainly took the next steps in the courts to try to further their case. Nancy Pelosi said from the podium the other day that there are certain things that she's trying to get through the courts first and let the courts do their job to try to get information, and then she can make the determination after that. But at the same time, nobody wants to get in the mid, like, to go through an impeachment hearing in the middle of an election year takes away from the candidate that you want to put up front.
Right.
And it can only hurt the Democratic candidate at the end of the day. But I would think that the message should be, and I know I was reading something that said Democratic governors are also equally as worried about what's happening in their states too, because the Democrats don't have a clear message right now. And part of the reason is that there's not one leader, and the only one leader is the House, is Nancy Pelosi, and she's not the one dictating what Democratic candidates say and do. So there's not one central thing. And the DNC, is trying to be as in the background as possible, just supporting as many candidates as they can. So there's not one message coming from one central place. So I think on impeachment, it's going to be like, it's catch-22.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your takeaway from the Mueller testimony? Because I know a lot of people were disappointed and felt like he didn't really offer anything. He was very much so, I can't get into that. Look at the report. It was very much a per my last email kind of response for all of the responses that he was giving. And I know there were two parts to it. I'm just curious what your takeaway was from that.
Well, listen, I think that the Bob Mueller basically said what Democrats needed him to say. Bob Mueller is not a splashy person.
Right.
He's not James. He's not James Comey. If people thought that he was going to come out there and
perform,
say and perform for them, then they were mistaken. And that says more about us as a society than it does Bob Mueller, because he basically said, if the OLC report, their recommendation had not said that, yes, I mean, the Office of Legal Counsel's interpretation of the rule that a sitting president can't be indicted had said that basically said that they couldn't indict the president, but that doesn't mean that he said that, the question I think was asked by, like, from the jump, from Jerry Nadler or something like that, from the first question, which was, would you have indicted this president after? And basically he was like, well, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what else do you need to hear after that?
And that he's not exonerated. He said,
well, here's the problem with exoneration. And Republicans tried to make this whole thing like, I was listening to something. They were like, well, exoneration's not, Fox News tried to do this whole thing. Well, Bob Mueller can't exonerate anybody. Well, the only person that was talking about exoneration the whole time was the president.
It was Trump.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, nobody else was talking about exoneration.
Well, he even doubled down and even was like, well, Bob, he can't exonerate. It's like, but all you've been tweeting is total exoneration.
Exactly.
Which is it?
And they said that in April or in May when the report came out that, full exoneration. You saw Sarah Huckabee Sanders say it. You saw the White House say it. You saw the president say it. You saw Republicans say it.
Yeah.
And they want to use this word exoneration. And they want to, they have, what is that? A little amnesia. 4-month amnesia about, whether or not, like, it's like we're not, and it's like they think that we're idiots. And most people are.
Yeah.
And they can do that by saying between April, May, June, July. It's only July.
Yeah.
And in 3 months, they wanted to pretend they thought people forgot.
Of course.
And I think that Democrats have to, somehow Democrats have to break through, anybody really, because got to be able to break through in some of these, with some ads and some targeted things, and to be able to say, look, this is the reality. Democrats have to do it. They've got to be. I'm a big fan of a town hall. I always said the Democrats should be going around the country over the next couple of years, and just being like, this is what we're doing as a groups. It shouldn't be just because, but everybody has obligations to their district. But I think if you get some big hitters in very specific areas and they're out there doing their thing, and they can take the case to the American people a little different way, because Barack Obama did it for a long time, and that's how we got a lot of things passed. So,
and you've mentioned before how you felt that the Democrats didn't have a very clear message to express to voters and to the American people, and I actually think that would be a very good idea for people to hear exactly what they want, what they're trying to do, and what they plan to do in the future.
Sure, but it's not like the Democrats haven't been doing anything.
For sure.
And since they took over in January, we've seen a litany of bills go through the House of Representatives, and then they die in the Senate. So this idea that Donald Trump tweets all the time, well, Democrats haven't been doing anything. Well, yes, they have. They've passed election security. They've passed border security. They've been able to compromise on certain things, and by the time it gets to the Senate, the president doesn't support it because of a provision that he doesn't like, and then it dies, and then the president blames it on the Democrats, and it's a cycle, right? And so I think that Democrats just have to do a better job. They've got a little bit of Barack Obama syndrome, where they don't want to brag about the things that they've been doing.
Right.
Barack Obama never bragged about it. If Barack Obama had bragged about the things that he did over the last 8 years, we wouldn't have been in this situation.
Right.
He just wasn't that person.
That's
He was like,
That's
I'm ready to move on to the next thing. I've already done. I've said what I said. I've done what I've done, and we're moving on.
Well, it's funny because now we have this complete contrast of humility and narcissism, and it's like, well, there's no middle ground.
But people don't elect. It's like high school, student government, right?
Right.
People want to see results, and they want to know that results are happening.
Right.
That's it. And humility is one thing, but a humble brag is not going to hurt somebody.
Right.
In this case, it hurt the entire country because now we have Donald Trump.
Right. And now he brags about everything and he hasn't done anything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, I think the next president's certainly going to have to be that middle ground because, as we always say, it takes a narcissist to think that you can run the most powerful country in the world.
Well, there's a little bit of ego there, but I don't necessarily think you're being a narcissist to think that you can run the country. I think it's having ego and confidence in yourself. I think there's a fine line.
Yeah.
And he's obviously crossed it. But I think he's leaped across the line. But yeah, he's the clear definition of a narcissist. But I think believing in yourself and thinking, well, I have the tools, I don't necessarily view that as being narcissistic.
I don't know. I think sorry to always step back on these questions,
you're fine,
but in general, I think what will be instructive, assuming he doesn't plunge, Trump doesn't plunge us into war or just crazy recession or something.
There's no way to tell.
Yeah, who knows? But I think actually if we're fortunate enough to 20 years from now look back on this, one of the lessons might be that the office of president is not as essential or powerful as what we probably grew up with. And it's more of a figurehead. This is we know people are like, oh, the gas prices. Well, this is not my version of economic recovery president. Right. It's he doesn't have a whole lot of sway.
But that's also people not knowing how it works.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I guess what I'm saying is, what was the question again?
The narcissism and ego, do you think it's not? I don't think it's necessarily narcissistic to think that you can run the country.
Yeah,
it's just a level of ego
I don't think anyone thought
probably
Jimmy Carter was a narcissist.
Right.
He's like the Mr. Rogers of presidents.
Yeah.
But I guess what I'm saying is and then there are other people who are like George W. Bush that I don't know. He could have the gusto to be like, I'm going to run this thing. Or he could just be like, well, you're the expert here. What do you think?
Right.
And I think a lot of presidents did that. I think George W. Bush had Dick Cheney.
Right. In general, I think the marks of a successful, someone who's good at their job as a president is someone who would have skills that dovetail with a really good human resources person that just has a knack for getting the right people in the right positions and then to just just go along with that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's totally fine if you think that you can, there's something. I don't think that someone who's just, a reasonable person who just grows up and then suddenly they achieve that high of an office in any field. It's just it's not someone who goes to work from 9 to 6. It's just not. Not to say that those people are narcissists, but like there's something just a little bit off.
It is a little bit off. I mean, it is a balance. It is a person of ambition, and a low level narcissism to believe that you can lead a group of people better than the next person.
Right.
I mean, you do have to, ego is one thing, and I think ego comes from success.
Mm-hmm.
But
Or not.
or
Some
not.
people just have ego.
Right,
man.
exactly.
Right. Or and in some cases, you think that you are it, and you are that person, and that, I'm not saying that's just the president. I'm saying anybody that's running for elected office, for whatever reason, whether or not they were good or bad, or so we'll see what happens.
What do you think any of the Democrat candidates currently could say to sway any Trump voters to vote for them?
I think they're going to say exactly what we've been saying, which is, look, we have fought for policies across the country, and we've seen areas where a living wage has been successful. Where we understand that you are in a situation financially where you can't pay your medical bills, and here are the policies that we're putting forth to do that. I think for a Trump voter, a lot of people look at minorities and say, well, they've gotten the leg up. Why haven't we gotten the leg up? And I think that's partly where a lot of that sentiment's coming from. Not realizing that marginalized groups are so far behind them, that the people are just trying to get to an even place, but they only hear what they hear: affirmative action,
of course,
and HBCUs and things like that.
Because they also don't read or look at the numbers.
Right.
Like nobody looks at statistics, and facts are never these people's friend.
No,
They don't want to know the facts.
No, and I think that's where you saw a lot of Trump voters come from. These people are these people. I say these people because that's what they talk about. People, are coming over and taking our jobs. Well, nobody has ever said on camera, as far as I've seen, anybody running for office, which is, well, you're not out there getting those jobs to begin with.
Right.
Would you like to go sit in an orange field?
Right.
You know what? How about you do that? The next person that wants to complain to you about somebody taking their jobs away from them, I want to see you out in that orange field.
Right.
I want to see you out in that produce field. I want to see you out there doing some of these jobs, because what's happening in Ohio is certainly not happening in California. It's certainly not happening in Arizona. Certainly not happening in Texas. So those are that's the reality, and nobody's out there saying that.
Right.
We certainly just need somebody out there being like, look, this is the reality. You either like it or you don't. And Democrats don't like to tough love people. Barack Obama tried towards the end of his presidency
because he was on his way out.
It's like when black folks got upset about Bill Cosby. Not about Bill Cosby, about his legal situation, but what Bill Cosby was saying about black fathers. They didn't like that, but it wasn't like it wasn't true.
Right.
And so I think that is, we've got to get into the tough love arena. We've got to get into the reality arena, because Republicans are so far out of the reality that somebody's got to be real.
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of, if just as a base level, everything that we've been talking about, but like it's also things from 2016. Like nothing's really changed, and honestly, because nothing's really changed in that sense, in my head, it's more like, well, if those people are out of reality, like these people, like, if no matter who you are, there's some probably real nutcases on both sides. I get it.
Well,
but like the other people are like, they're well-meaning people that are just listening to a source that like digests things for them and makes it seem like the end result might be crazy, but the reasoning behind, like, you listen to a Fox News host, they'll walk you through something, and you'll be like, if you're not really paying attention, if you're just like, if you have it on in the background, you're like, oh, that is a kind of a, and then it's just like, well, what do they say about that? Well, I'm not going to listen to what they say, but what's the end? What's the end goal?
Right.
The end, the takeaway. And it's something that sounds not great, but then you're like, well, I mean, I'm sure this guy, he sounds smart.
Right.
It's just, you outsource your thinking because it's a lot to get a handle on.
And that's a problem because in doing that, we're obviously being very lazy.
Yeah.
and we're just digesting like a small fraction of it.
Yeah, because again, like some Democratic candidate could have just a terrific 3-minute speech, not even long, 3 minutes, just like bulleted point list on on a dry erase board with a diagram that's easy to follow, that's made for human consumption, and that the Trump voter doesn't watch that.
No,
they'll never come across that.
Of course not.
They will only see a tweet of a reaction. And so like, what is that person going to say to that Trump voter? It's like, I mean, the right thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, but there are some Fox News hosts like Chris Wallace and Shep Smith. Who, Chris Wallace basically said to Mick Mulvaney, the president's chief of staff today, he said, so what do you think the president's, tweets were racist? And Mick Mulvaney said, well, I think you're reading between the lines too much. And Chris Wallace said, no, I'm reading the lines. He said that on the air. And I think that there are certain Fox News personalities that will do that. The folks over at Fox and Friends won't do that because they're not that bright.
Right.
To eat Chick-fil-A, just to do petty shit on a reality, I'm sorry, not a reality, but
it basically is a reality television show.
On a show like Fox and Friends, where a morning show like that is just wild to me.
Yeah.
And I was reading there's this article that somebody just posted back from 2015 that says, hoping to reach African American voters nationally in his bid for the Democratic nomination, Bernie Sanders toured the West Baltimore neighborhood where Freddie Gray was arrested. He observed, and likened the poverty he observed to that of the third world. See, that's the kind of stuff that Donald Trump will latch on to, and he'll be able to say there's a Bernie Sanders, as the Democratic nominee. God hopes not.
But if he is,
I'll vote for him.
Yes.
Never Bernie. Never Hillary.
I'll vote for him. But that, that's the kind of stuff that's easily to be able to kind of latch onto, because all Donald Trump has to say, well, Bernie said it,
right,
or this person said
it.
And same thing with Kamala Harris. I think that it's going to be tougher for Donald Trump to go after Kamala Harris. She's going to be like, well, she was too tough on black people. He is never going to be able to. He'll use it.
Oh yeah,
for sure. For sure.
But then Kamala can shoot back. Well, listen, as a prosecutor, I'm tough on crime, no matter if they're black, white, across the board.
But see, that actually does concern me for her, because I feel like the way that he has a way with words, he might actually convince some black people that she isn't for them.
Sure, but I think black people I think that black voters now are a little bit smarter.
I hope so.
I think black voters genuinely are smarter than the average voter, because here in Los Angeles, we have obviously a black folks are a minority to the Latino population here, but and probably the minority other than the Asian population here in Koreatown. But if you look at the makeup of African Americans who are engaged in party politics, it's a lot more than a lot of other folks a lot of other demographics can claim. So, I think that is, you look at where folks are going, you look at, okay, well, they're targeting South Carolina, and they're targeting Georgia, and they're targeting areas where there's a predominantly black population early, because they know that they need those votes for a reason. There's a reason why Iowa is, people always ask, well, why is Iowa the first caucus? It's because that is a test area for white people, because it's a mixture of different types of voters. And cows, black and white.
Oh my God.
And so I think, I think that is what you, I think that this is why Kamala Harris came out with an entire plan on historically black universities the other day. It's why Pete Buttigieg put out a whole thing on criminal justice reform. It's, not that it's crazy to think, because it's not that criminal justice reform is inherently a black issue. It just so happens to be an issue that, black voters are more interested in. But, I think it
affects more black people.
It affects more black people. What I mean to say is to make it to make it a black
Yeah.
issue.
Yeah.
Makes it is what I go back to what I said earlier, which is like, well, there's a lot of white families out there who don't know any better, who certainly go through the same exact things, whether or not they're on disability or welfare or failing schools or who the opioid crisis certainly affects more white people than it does black people. The drugs affect different demographics differently. We've certainly seen a lot more focus on, say, the opioid crisis than we do the crack crisis.
Right.
And you're like, sure, but I think that those are those Trump voters are being like, well, if criminal justice reform is at the forefront of black voters, then they must be doing something wrong. That is where people that is what people think.
Yep, it is.
And so, we've got to change the narrative a little bit because, like I said, while there are more black males and folks in federal prisons, white Americans commit more crimes, and we know that to be just factually true.
But that's also just because there's more white people to commit more crimes.
Well, they are criminals.
But I'm just saying, percentage-wise, if you look at population, there's more white people, so there's probably going to be more white people to commit crimes anyway. That's how I view.
You would have to do it. You have to just break it down by
right. But I would think that it's not that there are more white people. Obviously, white people are about to be the minority, and they understand that. But they also believe that they can get away with it.
Oh, for sure.
That's why there are more white criminals.
For sure.
Because they know they can get away with it.
Because history has shown them that they can.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just, for example, there's a Republican running against Representative Ilhan Omar in Minnesota. Well, just last week, she was arrested for shoplifting. Over a period of time. She shoplifted like $2,000 from a Target.
Winona Ryder.
I mean, my goodness, and then
and Target's cheap, so why are you shoplifting?
It's
I mean, my goodness.
Her daddy didn't love her.
Oh my gosh.
And then had the audacity to just say, "Hey, that's not true." Which were like, well, if you got arrested, there's a reason you were caught. Right. And then said, well, if that was true, I wouldn't run for office. Well, yes, you would have, because we've seen criminals run for office and win.
Right.
Point in case,
he's sitting in the
White House right now. So you can sort of do that. So I think that's what I'm saying is that I think that people of a different privilege certainly will go out of their way to do things because they know that they can.
Well, yeah, they're testing the system for sure, because the system was made for them to,
Right.
And it was not made for us, for sure, for people of color. But we're also just seeing there's been more consequences lately, and privilege is starting to kind of get dismantled as we go throughout these years. We have people that are getting filmed and videoed saying racist things and doing racist things, and they're losing their jobs. And a lot of people and companies are finally realizing, I don't want to be associated with that because it's bad for business also. Like, for example, with Nike, that's why they didn't do that Betsy Ross flag, because they're like, look, the flag was hijacked by a bunch of racists. I don't want to be a part of that. So I agree with you in that sense.
But see, that was the other part, is that nobody explained the Nike situation to anybody. Nobody knew what was going on.
They just thought it was Colin Kaepernick.
They just thought it was Colin Kaepernick
Right.
thing, and then Nike didn't even explain.
Yes, and that was their
And I'm
error
like,
for sure.
Who is running the Nike? I have seen more creative statements come out of this straight pride thing that's happening in Boston.
Oh, yeah.
Like companies being like, absolutely not.
Yeah.
But then I read this, I think it was like TripAdvisor or Lyft or one of the companies wrote out a whole thing that their entire statement was made up of pop music, and they're just like, can you be creative, Nike? Obviously you're in hot water, but they're not going to do that because they also donate to Republican candidates. So they certainly got to ride that line.
For sure. But they also like to stay in the headlines, I feel like. They do a lot of shock factor stuff.
Well, they
on
use Colin
purpose.
Kaepernick to stay in the headlines. If they didn't, they
True.
wouldn't be where they were. I mean,
That's
but
true.
you don't see Disney doing any of that.
And Disney will never.
And they don't have to.
Well, I mean, they like to do shock factor, but it's in a different way.
Right. So we'll see.
So, as I mentioned before, I feel like at this point, people that are Trump supporters, I would basically say, like, if you're still supporting him at this point, you identify as a racist, and you're fine with that because that is what he is kind of using his platform to do right now. Because he's not really, you said, he doesn't pass any like policy that has affected anybody in a positive way, especially his supporters, which is so surprising to me. And everything that all his rampages and all his rants are really, really based on this hateful and racist rhetoric. So going into this next election, do you think that that's simply the platform that he's going to be running on to try to get reelected? Or do you think, and I doubt that this is, but I'm just trying to be devil's advocate here, do you think he's trying to not get reelected? So that's why he's going crazy every day.
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean,
maybe he's like, maybe I need to go this way and nobody will vote for me if I show.
Right. But I don't know. He started running for re-election the day after inauguration.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump doesn't. He's certainly not a person that likes to lose.
Yeah.
And he's still having trouble having lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, because he still brings it up.
Right. So I don't know that he's trying to run to lose. I think that he is trying to win, but because he already knows he's not going to win the popular vote going into it. I think the estimate's like 5 million people are not going. He's just going to lose by 5 million votes. But those 5 million votes have to be in very strategic areas. I mean, and there was, everybody has seen over the past few weeks, the analysis that says Donald Trump could lose by 5 million votes and still win the Electoral College.
Yeah.
And we know that to be true because of states like California and Texas and New York and a couple other places. So I think that he's just trying to hold on to those pockets that won him the re-election last time. But I don't know, that it'll be very interesting to see the numbers roll in next year. And then the post-analysis to say, were those Hillary Clinton haters or were those actual Trump voters? And I suspect that it's going to be more Hillary Clinton haters and the reason why she lost than it will be anything. Because we were coming off of a very contentious primary, and which is why Donald Trump very slowly has been trying to insert himself into Bernie Sanders. I mean, you know what I mean? He's been around.
That sounds awful.
I was like, you might want to reword that.
That is not the one that I want to watch. But what I mean to say is insert himself into the primary, saying that Bernie Sanders got the raw deal last time.
Yeah, you're just going.
Got the
Don't say short end of the stick either.
That it was all rigged last time, and he's trying to make that a thing for this election early, so that he can use it later.
Right.
Because if when Bernie Sanders loses, Donald Trump won't be able to. He will have to use the RNC's whole apparatus, the whole political arm, to be able to push out information on a candidate that he's never had to run against before. Right. And this will be new territory for him.
So, John, for you, because I know you're a registered independent, and you're not really.
I am.
That.
Yes, you are.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But you typically have voted Democrat, but I know you don't really like to get so involved in politics. But for you, what would a candidate have to say for you to want to vote for them?
I mean, this is
like, what do you care about the most?
This is different.
Because you don't care.
Different time. No, I do care, but like the choice is I think that
No, I mean you don't care like who it is. You're voting for that person.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm just curious, what would draw you to somebody, like in watching debates or hearing what something that one of the candidates said, like what interests you?
I don't know because I don't even consider this to be those debates are kind of instructive, but like I don't see myself as having a choice in the matter.
You're like, they could be talking about
it's
just
like
having
tell me which one
day.
is the one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think most people watch the Democratic debates as saying, well, who's going to stack up the best against the incumbent? You know, and that's honestly what I look for more than anything else. And this is just, I know it's just a fool's errand. There's no way that you could look at this and be, but like someone who comes off as like almost natural and not practiced. Because some of those like zingers that they have in the debates, like, but
practice that.
Like the food fight thing. Like that's a practice. I get it. And it's gonna go viral, but like it doesn't feel. It feels inauthentic.
It doesn't feel authentic to you. Yeah.
But that's beside it. But honestly, because this is the thing, is that like these are all of those candidates are all chefs, and they've constructed a menu. But then not everyone wants everything on the menu, and so they borrow from other people's menus. Like, well, this is what I'm offering now. You know what I mean? So, like, why do I need to go into a tasting kitchen now? Because that menu is going to change, and you're going to stand for these other things, and you're going to make this dish instead.
Right.
So I just don't. It's like it's just more. But like I would like to do other things with my time than to sit here and wait on something that's interim and will change.
Because you already know that whomever it is, that's who you're voting for.
Sure. Yeah.
No, sure. Yes.
Yeah.
You better let him know.
Right? I'm letting him know. You voting for whoever's against Trump. And he even said he would vote for Bernie. For Drexel to say I'll vote for Bernie if he gets the nomination.
But I would have done it last time too. I mean, like,
I know.
it's just one of those things where you're like, look, it's not even the lesser of two evils. It is one evil over another. You know what I mean? It is one is evil versus semi-good.
Right.
You know, and I know independents like to tout, not particularly John, but I know independents like to tout.
Am I really an independent?
Yes, that's what you've told me. We've been together 10 years, and you don't even
remember.
know. Yes, you're a registered
You better
independent.
You better check that. I mean, here in California, it doesn't really
It doesn't
matter.
matter
because
because
you
I'm
can
not
vote in
Yeah.
But
Yeah, you are.
But
you know everything about
I
me.
do know everything about you.
What's my blood type?
oh my gosh!
I gotta find that out, actually.
But she knows you're an independent.
Wait, aren't you? Are you O?
No, that's you.
Oh, I'm O. What are
Yeah.
you? You're A?
A positive.
Oh, you're A positive.
Think of
yeah.
my GPA.
Oh my gosh. Go back to
Jesus.
Drexel. What were you saying?
And I was going to say that independents typically, will try to tout their independence from a political party.
Yeah.
And more power to them. But I also think when it comes down to right and wrong, I think that independents got to make a choice, and that's hopefully what they'll see in the next election.
Well, what would you suggest for people to look out for, and what do you think is going to happen in the next couple months?
Well, I think we have a couple more debates. We have a debate this week, debate number 2, and then we get a break in September, and then the next debate's not till October. So I think that that we'll see Democrats try to decide on impeachment. It might be that September is that window, so that if there's no debate in September, then it will probably be September when they make the decision, because then Democratic candidates won't have to answer for it in September, like they will have to in October. And then, and that'll be it, because I mean, obviously right now there's not much that can be done outside of that. I mean, Mitch McConnell's not doing anything.
Did he ever?
So so there's not much that can be done other than seeing what Nancy Pelosi's going to do next.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for joining me. Karmel, we missed you. I know you're listening. And of course, in true We Need to Talk fashion, we end every episode highlighting a person or community or organization that's doing good in the world. And I'm highlighting Mr. Drexel Heard this week. So please make sure you follow him on his social media pages, especially as we get deeper into these debates and upcoming election next year. So Drexel, what are your social media pages for them to follow you on?
You can follow me at Drexel Heard pretty much everywhere. And I think on Facebook, I'm like Drexel Heard Official.
I think that's what it is.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can find me there.
He's the only Drexel Heard.
Yeah, I mean, how many do you know?
Yeah.
And
I only heard of one.
yeah, I think with we've got a couple of conventions. We have the California convention coming up in November. I was just elected as one of the vice presidents for Stonewall recently.
Yeah.
Humble brag.
Humble brag.
He's doing stuff, you guys.
I just mean that in the sense that it'll be a lot more active than it has been, because I'm being forced to be a little bit more active on social media. I try not to get into crazy debates at this point anymore, because I'm like, look, I just don't have that kind of patience.
But what I do like about you when you post, because my page is completely different, but you post the facts, and I think that that's what people need to see and read.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend following Drexel, especially if you want to stay informed about all this issues going on.
But I also post really crazy stuff.
You do.
You know, it's. I try to keep it balanced. People are like, "What is he posting about?" I thought he was a political person.
I love it. Well, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and follow us on all social media at We Need to Talk the Podcast, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.